Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you sat down to do something important, something that genuinely mattered to you, and actually finished it without once reaching for your phone, opening a new tab, or letting your mind drift somewhere else entirely? Think about it honestly. Not the version of yourself you wish you were, the real you, the one sitting here right now. If you're struggling to remember that moment, you're not broken. You're not lazy. You're not someone who lacks discipline or willpower. You're someone living in a world that was specifically, intentionally, and systematically designed to make deep focus nearly impossible. And here's the part nobody tells you. The chaos in your head isn't coming from inside you. It's being manufactured from the outside and delivered straight to your brain 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with terrifying precision. But here's what I need you to hold on to before we go any further. You can get it back. Your focus isn't gone. It's buried. And this guide is going to help you dig it out, dust it off, and turn it into the most powerful tool you've ever used. Before we dive deep, I want you to do something right now. Put one hand on your chest. Feel your heartbeat. That rhythm, steady, consistent, reliable, is what sustained focus feels like when you finally master it. Not frantic, not scattered, not jumping from beat to beat like a song that can't find its tempo. Steady, present, yours. That's where we're going together. Over the next chapters, you're going to understand why your brain works the way it does, why the world is working against you, and, most importantly, exactly what you can do about it. Not vague motivational advice, not just try harder. Real, science-backed, immediately actionable strategies that have transformed the lives of thousands of people who started exactly where you are right now. People who felt scattered, overwhelmed, like they were constantly busy but never actually getting anywhere. People who had big dreams but couldn't seem to stay focused long enough to chase them. People who looked at high performers and thought, what do they have that I don't? The answer isn't talent. It isn't luck. It isn't even intelligence. It's focus. And focus is a skill, which means it can be learned. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The attention crisis nobody is talking about. Here's a number that should stop you cold. The average person now switches their attention every 47 seconds, not minutes, seconds. Think about what that means for your life. You sit down to write something important, and 47 seconds later, something pulls you away. You try to read, and before a single page is finished, your brain is already looking for the exit. You attempt to have a real conversation, and while the other person is still mid-sentence, part of your mind has already wandered off to check the notification that just lit up in your peripheral vision. This isn't weakness. This isn't a character flaw. This is the result of living inside an ecosystem that has been engineered with billions of dollars and some of the sharpest minds on the planet to keep you exactly this scattered, exactly this reactive, and exactly this dependent. Your attention is not just valuable to you. It is the most valuable commodity in the modern economy. And right now, whether you realize it or not, you are selling it cheap. The world you're actually living in. Imagine you woke up tomorrow and someone told you that your neighborhood had been quietly flooded with a colorless, odorless gas that made you slightly more impulsive, slightly more anxious, and slightly less capable of sustained thought, and that this gas was being pumped in deliberately by corporations profiting from your diminished cognitive state. You'd be outraged. You'd demand it stop. You'd take action immediately. But here's the uncomfortable truth. That's essentially what's happening. The gas just isn't in the air. It's in your pocket. It's on your desk. It's on the screen you looked at before you started reading this. Every app on your phone was designed by teams of behavioral psychologists, neuroscientists, and engagement specialists whose job, their literal job description, was to make their product as difficult to put down as possible. They studied the same psychological patterns used in slot machine design. They tested hundreds of variations of notification sounds to find the ones most likely to trigger an immediate response. They analyzed your scrolling behavior, your pause patterns, your reaction times, and they used that data to build systems that exploit your brain's deepest vulnerabilities. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is documented, publicly acknowledged, and in some cases, openly celebrated in Silicon Valley. Former engineers from the world's largest tech platforms have come forward to describe exactly how these systems work and what they were designed to do to your attention. You are not using these platforms. These platforms are using you. And the cost isn't just a few wasted hours. The cost is your life's work, unlived, your potential, untapped, your most important relationships, experienced at half-presence, your biggest goals, perpetually deferred to some future version of yourself who somehow has more time, more discipline, more focus. That future version isn't coming unless you build them deliberately. Starting now. What distraction is actually costing you? Let's get specific, because abstract problems rarely motivate real change. So let's talk numbers. Research from productivity science shows that after a single interruption, a notification, a colleague stopping by, a quick phone check, it takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to fully return to the mental state you were in before the interruption, not to start working again, to get back to the same depth of focus. Now count how many interruptions you experience on an average day. 20? 40? More? If you're interrupted just 4 times in an hour, you mathematically never reach deep focus at all. You spend the entire hour in a constant state of mental warm-up, never actually arriving at the work itself. Multiply that across a week, a month, a year, a career. The hours you think you've spent working, many of them were spent in a shallow, fragmented simulation of work, the appearance of productivity without the substance. You've been going through the motions on the surface of your potential, never diving below. And here's what makes this particularly devastating for someone like you. Someone who cares about growth, who has real goals, who wants to build something meaningful with their life. The gap between what you could accomplish with deep focus and what you're currently accomplishing with scattered attention isn't linear. It's exponential. 1 hour of genuine, uninterrupted deep focus doesn't just produce slightly better work than 3 hours of distracted effort. It produces qualitatively different work. Work that requires insights, connections, and creative leaps that are simply not accessible when your attention is fragmented. The writer who can focus for 4 uninterrupted hours doesn't just write 4 times more than the writer who's constantly checking messages. They write stories that are 4 levels deeper. The entrepreneur who protects their morning focus time doesn't just get more done. They access the kind of strategic clarity that creates actual breakthroughs rather than incremental improvements. This is what's at stake. Not just productivity, your actual potential as a human being. The hidden rewiring. There's one more piece of this that you need to understand, and it's the most personal part of all. Every time you respond to a notification, every time you switch tasks without finishing, every time you reach for your phone when your brain feels the first whisper of boredom or discomfort, you are training your brain, not metaphorically, literally, neurologically training it. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine that optimizes itself for whatever you do repeatedly. Behavioral scientists call this Hebbian plasticity, but you can just think of it this way. The brain you practice having today is the brain you'll have tomorrow. If you practice fractured, reactive surface-level attention, your brain gets better at fractured, reactive surface-level attention. The neural pathways that support distraction grow thicker and faster. The pathways that support sustained focus thin out from disuse. You have been unknowingly training yourself to be distracted, every ping responded to, every tab opened, every moment of discomfort escaped through scrolling, training. But, and this is the hope you need to carry with you into every chapter that follows, neuroplasticity works both ways. The same brain that trained itself toward distraction can train itself toward focus. Every time you choose to stay with a difficult task instead of escaping, every time you put the phone down and return to your work, every time you sit with mental discomfort instead of fleeing it, you are retraining your brain. This is not motivational fluff. This is neuroscience. Your brain physically changes based on where you direct your attention, which means every choice you make about focus is not just a productivity decision, it's a decision about who you are becoming. Choose wisely. And let's get to work. Chapter 2. The Science of Your Own Mind. You are not the problem, but you do need to understand the machinery you're working with, because focus mastery isn't about forcing your brain to do something unnatural. It's about understanding how your brain actually works, and then setting up your life to work with that reality rather than against it. So let's take a tour of the most fascinating and consequential piece of hardware you'll ever own. 2 networks, 1 brain, inside your skull right now. 2 major brain networks are constantly competing for dominance. Understanding this competition is one of the most practically useful things you can ever learn about yourself. The first is called the task-positive network, though you can think of it simply as your focus engine. This is the neural network that activates when you're engaged in deliberate, goal-directed thinking. When you're solving a complex problem, learning something new, writing something meaningful, or having a genuinely deep conversation. This is the system that's running the show. The second is called the default mode network. Think of it as your mind-wandering engine. This is the system that activates when you're not actively concentrating on something specific. It's associated with daydreaming, self-referential thinking, replaying past events, and imagining future scenarios. Here's the critical thing you need to understand about these 2 networks. They are mutually inhibitory. When one is active, the other is suppressed. You cannot run both at full power simultaneously. It's not a limitation you can overcome with motivation or discipline. It's the fundamental architecture of human attention. This means that every moment your mind wanders during important work, every time you drift into a mental replay of last night's argument, or start mentally planning what to cook for dinner, or begin composing a response to an email you haven't checked yet, your focus engine goes offline. And the work that requires your focus engine, it waits. quietly deteriorating in quality with every passing second of default mode dominance. Understanding this doesn't just explain why focus is so hard, it explains exactly what you need to do about it. You need to learn to activate your focus engine deliberately and keep it running for longer and longer periods of time. That's trainable. Let's talk about how. The dopamine trap. You're living in. You've probably heard that dopamine is the pleasure chemical. That's not quite right, and the actual truth is far more useful for understanding your own behavior. Dopamine is not the chemical of having. It's the chemical of wanting. Dopamine doesn't flood your brain when you get the reward. It floods your brain in anticipation of the reward. It's the system that drives seeking behavior, the restless, forward-reaching, more impulse that pushes you toward potential opportunities. In the ancestral environment your brain evolved in, this was incredibly useful. It drove exploration, motivated effort, and rewarded curiosity about the unknown. It helped your ancestors scan the horizon, seek out food sources, and stay alert to possibilities. In the environment you actually live in today, it is being weaponized against you. Every notification on your phone triggers a small dopamine release, not because the notification is actually rewarding, but because it represents the possibility of something rewarding, a message, a like, an update, an opportunity. The anticipation itself is the drug. Social media platforms were designed with this specific mechanism in mind. The unpredictable, variable nature of what you might find when you open the app, sometimes something exciting, sometimes something boring, sometimes something emotionally activating, is not an accident. It's a deliberate recreation of the most addictive reinforcement schedule known to behavioral psychology, the variable ratio schedule, the same psychological principle that makes slot machines so difficult to walk away from. You're not weak for finding your phone compelling. You're human, and someone with significant resources spent years figuring out exactly how to exploit that humanity. But here's the flip side, and this is where it gets genuinely empowering. Dopamine also drives the seeking of mastery, achievement, and meaningful challenge. When you immerse yourself in genuinely difficult work and make progress, when you solve the hard problem, complete the meaningful project, develop the new skill, your dopamine system responds to that too, powerfully. The issue isn't your dopamine system, it's what you've trained it to seek. And with deliberate practice, you can retrain it to find the richest satisfaction not in the shallow ping of a notification, but in the deep, warm satisfaction of focused accomplishment. That retraining takes time, but it starts the moment you make your first conscious choice to stay with meaningful work instead of escaping to something easier. The attention span. Myth, you've probably heard the statistic that human attention spans have dropped below that of a goldfish. Maybe you've even believed it about yourself. Maybe you've used it as an excuse, I just can't focus, that's just how I am. Here's what's actually true. Your attention span has not biologically shrunk. Your capacity for sustained concentration is not permanently damaged. What has changed is the default state of your attention, the baseline mode your brain has been trained into by years of interaction with attention-fragmenting technology. The difference is enormous and hopeful. A muscle that has been atrophied from disuse isn't permanently destroyed. It's weakened, but it retains its potential for recovery. The same is true of your attention. The neural pathways for deep focus haven't been erased. They've been overgrown by pathways that compete with them. Clear the competing pathways through deliberate practice, environmental design, and consistent habit change, and the underlying capacity comes roaring back. People who commit to focus training consistently report that within just a few weeks of consistent practice, they begin to notice dramatic differences in their ability to sustain attention. Not because their brains fundamentally changed overnight, but because they started exercising neural circuits that had been dormant. You are not beyond recovery. You are not someone who just can't focus. You are someone who has been operating in an environment hostile to focus without the knowledge or tools to fight back. You now have the knowledge. The tools are coming, and your brain is ready to change. What attention actually is? Attention is not a single thing. It's a system, a collection of overlapping, interacting cognitive processes that can each be developed independently and then integrated into a whole that's far more powerful than the sum of its parts. Selective attention is your ability to choose what to focus on and filter out irrelevant information. Think of it as your mental spotlight. The ability to direct illumination where you choose and let everything else fade to shadow. Sustained attention is your ability to maintain focus on a chosen target over time, despite distractions, fatigue, and the constant pull of competing stimuli. This is what most people mean when they talk about focus. Divided attention is your ability to monitor multiple things simultaneously. Though, as we've discussed, the brain's capacity for this is far more limited than most people believe. Executive attention is your ability to manage conflict between competing impulses, to choose the focused, deliberate response over the reactive, impulsive one. This is the attention system most directly targeted by mindfulness training, and it's perhaps the most important one for living a focused life. Each of these systems can be developed. Each has specific training methods that produce measurable neurological changes, and each improvement you make in one system tends to ripple through the others, creating accelerating returns as your overall attention architecture strengthens. This is why focus training can feel exponential rather than linear once you get going. Early progress might feel slow and effortful, but as the underlying systems strengthen and begin to work together, the improvements compound. A few weeks in, people often report sudden leaps in their ability to concentrate, not because something magical happened, but because enough of the underlying architecture was rebuilt that the whole system began to function at a qualitatively higher level. Your attention system is waiting to be rebuilt. Let's talk about how to do it. Chapter 3. Your environment is not neutral. Most people approach focus like a purely internal problem. They try to focus harder. They tell themselves to be more disciplined. They download productivity apps and buy planners and make ambitious to-do lists, and then feel like failures when the environment they've placed themselves in keeps pulling their attention apart. Here's the insight that changes everything. Your environment is not neutral. Every single element of your physical and digital surroundings is either actively supporting your ability to focus or actively undermining it. There is no middle ground. The most effective approach to building lasting focus is not to rely on willpower in hostile environments. It's to design your environments so that focus is the easy, natural choice and distraction is the friction-laden, effortful one. Let's build your environments from the ground up. The physical space audit. Walk into the space where you do your most important work. Don't sit down yet. Just stand in the doorway and look at it with fresh eyes. What do you see? Is the surface where you work clear and organized, or is it covered in visual noise? Papers, objects, reminders, chargers, empty cups, things that don't belong there? Visual clutter isn't just aesthetically unpleasant. Research has demonstrated that environmental clutter measurably increases cortisol levels and cognitive load. Your brain is processing all of that visual information even when you think you're ignoring it. And that processing is borrowing resources from your focus. What's the lighting like? Natural light is the gold standard for sustained cognitive performance. It helps regulate your circadian rhythm, supports appropriate cortisol and melatonin balance, and has been shown to significantly improve mood, alertness, and cognitive function compared to artificial light. If you work primarily indoors, investing in full-spectrum lighting that mimics natural daylight is one of the highest return environmental upgrades you can make. What's the temperature? Your brain has a surprisingly narrow comfort zone for optimal performance. Research consistently shows cognitive function begins to decline when ambient temperature rises above about 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Too cold creates physical discomfort that competes for attention. The sweet spot is generally between 68 and 72 degrees, cool enough to promote alertness without creating distraction. What's the sound environment? This is where most people's work environments are doing the most damage to their focus. The ideal sound environment for deep cognitive work is either complete silence or consistent non-linguistic background noise. Rain sounds, brown noise, nature recordings. Music with lyrics is particularly problematic for any work that involves language, reading, or writing, because your brain's language processing systems cannot help but attempt to parse the lyrics, stealing cognitive resources from your actual task. But don't just think about your physical workspace. Think about your bedroom, because where you sleep is actually part of your focus environment too. The quality of your sleep determines the quality of your prefrontal cortex function the following day, which means your bedroom environment directly affects your ability to focus during working hours. The digital environment redesign. Your phone is probably the most powerful focus destruction device ever created, and most people carry it within arm's reach during every waking moment of their lives. Let's change that relationship. This isn't about eliminating technology from your life. Technology, used intentionally, is an extraordinary amplifier of human capability. The goal is to transform your relationship with your devices from reactive to intentional, from being controlled by them to controlling them. Step 1. The notification audit. Go through every app on your phone right now, or if you're reading this later, do it today, not someday, and ask yourself honestly, does this app ever send me notifications that require immediate action? For the vast majority of apps, the honest answer is no. News apps, social media apps, shopping apps, entertainment apps, email apps, most communication apps outside of genuine emergency contacts, none of them send you notifications that can't wait until you choose to check them. Turn them all off. Not most of them, all of them that don't represent genuine emergencies. The psychological resistance you feel to doing this is itself valuable data. It tells you exactly how conditioned you've become to the variable reward system these apps have built around their notifications. The anxiety of potentially missing something is manufactured by design. It is not a rational reflection of actual consequence. What you will actually miss If you stop receiving notifications, nothing that matters. What you will gain: the ability to choose when you engage with digital communication rather than having that choice made for you by algorithms designed to interrupt you at maximum cognitive cost. Step 2. The phone geography shift. Where's your phone right now? If it's on your desk, in your pocket, or within arm's reach while you work, it is affecting your focus. Even if it's face down, even if it's on silent, even if you're not consciously aware of it. Research from the University of Texas found that having a smartphone within visual range, even when not in use, measurably reduces available working memory and executive function. The mere presence of the device consumes cognitive resources as your brain works to resist engaging with it. Move your phone to a different room when you need to focus, or put it in a drawer or in a bag across the room, not because you'll necessarily use it, but because its physical absence removes the unconscious cognitive load of resisting its presence. Step 3. The browser redesign. Your computer browser is almost certainly structured to support distraction by default. Bookmarks for social media at the top of your screen, multiple tabs open, a news feed on your default homepage, saved passwords that make entering distracting sites effortless. Redesign all of it. Remove social media bookmarks from your browser bar. Set your default homepage to something neutral, a blank page or a productivity tool. Install a website blocker for the sites that most reliably pull you away from important work, and set it to block those sites during your scheduled deep work hours. Create digital environments for different modes. Consider having separate browser profiles, one for focused work, stripped of all distracting elements, and one for general use. The simple act of switching profiles can become a meaningful psychological signal that you're entering focused mode. The social environment. Your environment includes the people around you, and the social context in which you work can powerfully support or undermine your focus. If the people around you are constantly available for interruption, normalize distraction as part of the workflow, and treat focused work time as a secondary concern behind immediate responsiveness, you are fighting an environmental battle that no amount of personal discipline can fully win. This doesn't mean you need to find new colleagues or new friends. It means you need to communicate clearly about what you need. Create structures that make your focused work time visible and respected, and when necessary, find physical spaces where the social environment supports deep concentration. If you work from home, this might mean having explicit conversations with family members about work hours that are not to be interrupted. It might mean working in a library or coffee shop during hours when your home environment is particularly distracting. If you work in an office, it might mean using headphones as a visible do not disturb signal, blocking your calendar for deep work sessions and defending those blocks, or arriving early or staying late to access the focus benefits of low traffic hours. The social element of environment design requires ongoing negotiation and adjustment, but the underlying principle is non-negotiable. Your environment profoundly shapes your behavior, and deliberately designing it for focus is not optional, it's foundational. Chapter 4. Building your focus system. You've heard the word discipline your entire life as though it were a finite resource you either have or don't have. The disciplined people stay focused. The undisciplined people get distracted. And if you're in the latter group, the conventional wisdom suggests you just need to try harder. This framing is not just unhelpful, it's actively counterproductive. Research in behavioral science has consistently demonstrated that willpower is indeed a limited resource that depletes with use. Relying on moment-to-moment willpower to maintain focus throughout the day is like trying to run a marathon on a single granola bar. You might make it through the first few miles, but you'll hit a wall long before the finish line. The people who appear to have extraordinary discipline aren't using more willpower than you. They've designed their lives so they need less of it. They've built systems, habits, routines, structures, and environmental configurations that make focused work the path of least resistance and distracted behavior the friction-laden exception. Let's build your system. The architecture of a focused day, your day, has a natural energy architecture. Most people, though not all, experience peak cognitive performance in the first 2 to 4 hours after waking, before decision fatigue and accumulated distractions have taken their toll. This peak performance window is your most valuable cognitive asset, and most people squander it completely. They wake up and immediately check their phones, dropping themselves into a reactive state before they've had a single proactive thought. They scroll through other people's priorities, news, social feeds, messages, before they've identified their own. By the time they sit down to do important work, their best cognitive hours are already gone. Protecting your peak performance window is the single highest leverage change most people can make to their focus and productivity. It's not about becoming a morning person or following some rigid routine. It's about recognizing when your brain is at its best and being ruthlessly intentional about what you put in that window. Here's what belongs in your peak performance window: your most cognitively demanding, most important, most creative, most strategically significant work. The work that moves the needle. The work that matters most to your real goals. Here's what does not belong there: email, social media, news, administrative tasks, reactive communication, meetings without clear cognitive requirements. Save those for later in the day when your mental energy has naturally declined and the cost of shallower engagement is lower. The deep work block, the fundamental unit of your focus system, is the deep work block, a scheduled, protected, non-negotiable period of uninterrupted focused work. Not, I'll try to focus for a while. A scheduled block with a specific start time, end time, and clearly defined objective. Here's how to structure one effectively. Before the block begins, spend 2 to 3 minutes getting clear on exactly what you're trying to accomplish. Not work on the project, something specific. Write the first 3 sections of the proposal, or work through the conceptual framework problem, or complete the design mock-up for the homepage. Specific, concrete, achievable within the time block. Write down any open loops, the nagging thoughts about things you need to remember, tasks you haven't addressed, worries that might surface and pull at your attention. Getting these out of your head and onto paper reduces their cognitive load significantly. Your brain won't keep interrupting your work to remind you of things if it trusts that those things are safely recorded. Put your phone in another room. Close all applications on your computer except those required for the task at hand. Set a timer for the duration of your block. Begin. During the block, when your mind wanders, and it will, especially early in your focus training, notice it without judgment and return your attention to the work. This noticing and returning is not a failure. It is the actual practice. Every time you catch a wandering mind and redirect it, you are doing a mental rep that builds your sustained attention capacity. It's the cognitive equivalent of a bicep curl. When you feel the urge to switch tasks or escape to something easier, sit with that urge for just a moment before acting on it. Acknowledge it. Breathe. Then consciously choose to return to your work. You are building tolerance for mental discomfort, and that tolerance is one of the most valuable cognitive assets a human being can develop. After the block, take a genuine break. Not scrolling social media. That's not rest. It's a different kind of stimulation. A genuine break might be a short walk, a glass of water, 5 minutes of quiet sitting, or a brief conversation about something unrelated to work. The goal is cognitive detachment, giving your prefrontal cortex a genuine rest period so it can recover for the next block. Progressive focus training. Here's a mistake almost everyone makes when they decide to improve their focus. They try to go from their current level of sustained attention directly to 4 or 5 hour blocks of deep work. This is like deciding to get fit by attempting a marathon on day 1. The result is pain, failure, and often the conclusion that you're just not built for this, when in reality, you simply tried to progress too far too fast. Focus is a physical capacity in the sense that it has to be trained progressively. Start where you are, not where you wish you were. If your honest current capacity for sustained focus before distraction becomes overwhelming is about 15 minutes, start there. Set a timer for 12 minutes of focused work. Do it deliberately, intentionally, with full commitment. Then take a genuine break. Then do another block. Over days and weeks, progressively extend your blocks. Add 5 minutes to your target each week. Track your progress, not just in minutes, but in the quality of your focus. There's a meaningful difference between distracted but still working and genuinely absorbed engagement, and you'll learn to distinguish between them as your practice deepens. Most people who commit to this progressive approach find that within 6 to 8 weeks, they're capable of sustained focus blocks of 60 to 90 minutes. Within a few months, 2 to 3 hour deep work sessions that once seemed impossible become not only achievable, but genuinely enjoyable. The key is consistency over intensity. Shorter blocks practiced every single day will develop your focus capacity far more effectively than occasional heroic attempts at marathon concentration sessions. The ritual factor. Elite performers in every discipline, athletes, musicians, surgeons, writers, researchers, use pre-performance rituals not because they are superstitious, but because they work. Consistent preparatory routines prime your nervous system for optimal performance by triggering the neural patterns associated with your best previous performances. Your brain learns associations through repetition. If you consistently engage in the same sequence of actions before beginning deep work, making a specific cup of tea, clearing your desk, putting on particular music or silence, sitting in a specific posture, taking 3 slow, deep breaths, stating your intention for the session, your brain begins to associate that sequence with the focused state you achieve afterward. Over time, the ritual itself starts to trigger the focus state, dramatically reducing the time and effort required to settle into deep work. What once required 20 minutes of gradual settling begins to happen in 5. The ritual becomes a neurological shortcut to concentration. Design your own ritual. Keep it simple enough to be reproducible. Use it consistently. Let your brain learn what it means. Accountability structures. There's a reason every effective training program includes some form of accountability. A coach, a training partner, a group, a progress tracking system. Accountability transforms focus from a private preference into a social commitment, and social commitments carry psychological weight that personal intentions often don't. This applies directly to focus development. Consider the following accountability structures: public commitment, tell someone, a friend, a colleague, a mentor, a community, what you're working on and when. Not just, I'm going to focus better, something specific and trackable. I'm committing to one 90-minute deep work block every morning for the next 30 days. Progress tracking. Keep a simple log of your deep work sessions, duration, quality, self-rated on a simple scale, what you accomplished, what got in the way. The act of tracking creates a feedback loop that accelerates learning and maintains motivation through the inevitable difficult patches. Social scaffolding. Find or create a community of people committed to similar focus goals, working alongside others, even virtually, through platforms where people share their work sessions in real time, harnesses the social facilitation effect, where the presence of others pursuing similar goals naturally increases your own effort and persistence. The goal of all these accountability structures is the same: to make your focus commitments real enough that breaking them carries a meaningful cost beyond just a vague sense of personal disappointment. Chapter 5. Advanced Focus Techniques for the Serious Practitioner. Once you've built the foundational practices, the environmental design, the daily architecture, the progressive training, the rituals, you're ready for the layer of techniques that separates good focus from exceptional focus. These are the tools used by elite performers across every field. Not mystical secrets, but well-researched, practically proven strategies for accessing and maintaining the highest levels of sustained concentration. The flow state. Understanding and cultivating your best workflow is the state psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi described as optimal experience, a condition of complete absorption in a challenging activity where self-consciousness fades, time perception distorts, and performance reaches its highest natural level. You've probably experienced flow at some point in your life. The hours that felt like minutes, the work that seemed to produce itself, the sense of complete rightness about what you were doing. If you're like most people, these experiences were rare, unpredictable, and seemingly beyond your control. They're not beyond your control. Flow states have identifiable preconditions that can be deliberately cultivated. The challenge-skill balance. Flow requires that the challenge of the task you're engaged in closely matches your current skill level. Too easy, and your brain grows bored and begins seeking more stimulating input. Too hard, and anxiety overwhelms engagement. The sweet spot, just at the edge of your current capabilities, where success is possible but not guaranteed, is where flow lives. This has a practical implication. Before beginning a deep work session, calibrate the difficulty of your work. If what you're working on feels too routine, find a way to increase the challenge. Set a higher quality bar, add constraints, push into areas slightly beyond your current competence. If it feels overwhelming, break it into smaller, more manageable components before diving in. Clear goals and immediate feedback. Flow requires that you know what you're trying to achieve and that you receive immediate or near immediate feedback on whether you're progressing toward it. Vague objectives and long feedback loops are flow killers. Structure your deep work sessions around specific, concrete objectives and, wherever possible, build in feedback mechanisms. If you're writing, reading your work aloud provides immediate feedback on quality. If you're coding, running tests provides immediate feedback on function. If you're practicing a skill, recording yourself and reviewing the footage closes the feedback loop that's essential for both learning and flow. Elimination of self-consciousness. Flow cannot coexist with the internal critic who's constantly evaluating your performance, worrying about how others will perceive your work, or catastrophizing about outcomes. One of the most effective ways to quiet that critic is to explicitly give yourself permission to do imperfect work during the session. Remind yourself, this session is about the process, not the product. The quality will emerge through iteration. What matters now is engagement. The internal critic's job is to protect you from embarrassment and failure. Acknowledge that job, reassure it that you're not in danger right now, and invite it to step aside so you can do the actual work. The metacognitive layer. Here's a skill that transforms good focus practitioners into exceptional ones. Metacognitive monitoring. The ability to observe the quality of your own attention in real time without breaking the focus you're observing. Most people have very little awareness of what's actually happening with their attention during work sessions. They're either focused or distracted, and they usually only notice the distraction after the fact. 20 minutes after their mind wandered, they suddenly realize they've been staring at the screen without actually reading or thinking. Metacognitive monitoring means developing an ongoing low-level awareness of your attention state. Not intrusive self-consciousness that disrupts your work, but a gentle background monitoring. The kind of awareness you develop when you learn to drive, where a part of your mind is always tracking the broader situation even as the main part focuses on the immediate task. You develop this through practice, at natural breakpoints in your work, the end of a paragraph, the completion of a subtask, the moment between reading and writing. Briefly check in with yourself. How absorbed was I just then? Was my mind fully engaged or partly elsewhere? What was the quality of that attention? Did I notice the moment my attention began to drift, or did I only notice it was gone? Over time, these check-ins become more automatic and less disruptive. You begin to catch attention wandering earlier and earlier, first minutes after the fact, then seconds after, then in the very moment it begins to happen. This early detection is enormously valuable because it allows you to redirect your attention before significant time and momentum is lost. The master practitioners of focus describe this as having a witness, a part of their awareness that observes the whole process from a slight distance without judgment. This witness doesn't interfere with the work. It simply keeps an eye on the quality of the engagement and sends a gentle signal when course correction is needed. Managing the internal enemies. External distractions are relatively easy to address once you understand them. Design your environment to reduce them. Use blocks and barriers. Create distance from your devices. The harder battle is with the internal enemies of focus, the thoughts, feelings, and mental patterns that sabotage your concentration from within. Anxiety and worry are perhaps the most common internal focus killers. When you're anxious about a deadline, an outcome, or a relationship, your brain's threat detection system stays partially activated, scanning for danger even while you're trying to work. This is cognitively expensive It consumes attention resources that could be directed toward your work. The most effective response to anxiety-driven distraction is not suppression, but acknowledgement. When anxious thoughts arise during focused work, instead of either fighting them away or following them into spiraling worry, try this. Pause briefly. Acknowledge the thought, I notice I'm worried about X, and then consciously set it aside with the internal statement, I'll think about this properly at specific time. Having a designated worry time, an actual scheduled period where you permit yourself to think through concerns, removes the brain's need to interrupt your work with them. Your mind can relax about a concern once it trusts that it will get attention at an appropriate time. Perfectionism is another internal enemy that masquerades as high standards. The perfectionist doesn't start until conditions are perfect. The perfectionist abandons work that doesn't immediately meet an impossibly high standard. The perfectionist edits before creating, evaluates before exploring, judges before experiencing. The antidote to perfectionism is separating the generative phase of work from the evaluative phase. In the generative phase, thinking, drafting, brainstorming, building, the rule is that judgment is suspended. You are creating, not evaluating. The internal critic gets no vote during this phase. In the evaluative phase, reviewing, editing, refining, deciding, judgment is welcomed and exercised rigorously. The key is that these phases happen sequentially, never simultaneously. Mental restlessness, the feeling that you should be doing something else, checking something, moving to a different task, is your brain's discomfort response to sustained cognitive challenge. When work gets hard, when progress slows, when you bump against the edges of your current capability, your brain generates a powerful impulse to escape to something easier and more immediately rewarding. This restlessness is not a signal that you're doing the wrong thing. It's often a signal that you're doing exactly the right thing, that you're working at the productive edge of your capabilities where real growth happens. The practice is to notice the restlessness, acknowledge it as your brain's discomfort response, and consciously choose to stay anyway. Each time you do this, you build tolerance for the discomfort that accompanies genuine challenge. And that tolerance is perhaps the most underrated component of focus mastery. Cognitive load management. Your working memory, the mental workspace where you hold and manipulate information during complex thinking, has a very limited capacity. Every open loop in your mind, every task you're trying to track, every commitment you're holding in mental suspension is consuming a portion of that limited capacity. Effective focus requires keeping your cognitive load as low as possible outside of the work itself, so that your full mental resources are available for the task at hand. Externalize everything. The most powerful single habit for reducing cognitive load is to capture everything that demands mental real estate, tasks, ideas, reminders, worries, commitments, in a trusted external system, rather than trying to hold it in your head. This isn't just a productivity strategy, it's a focus strategy. Your brain can relax its background monitoring function once it trusts that important information is safely recorded somewhere reliable. Reduce decision density. Every decision you make, what to wear, what to eat, when to respond to which message, what to work on next, draws from the same pool of cognitive resources as your focused work. Systematically reducing the number of decisions you make through routines, defaults, and automation preserves more of that resource for what actually matters. Many of the world's highest performers are famous for dramatically limiting their wardrobe choices, meal options, and daily decision points, not because they're strange, but because they understand that cognitive resources spent on trivial decisions are cognitive resources unavailable for important work. Batch similar tasks, context switching, moving between different types of cognitive work carries a real time and quality cost as your brain reconfigures itself for each new type of task. Batching similar types of work together reduces this switching overhead. Group all communication tasks together, all administrative tasks together, all creative work together, rather than scattering them throughout the day in a way that requires constant mental gear shifting. The recovery imperative. Sustainable focus is not about pushing harder and longer. It's about understanding the rhythm of cognitive effort and recovery, and honoring both sides of that rhythm with equal seriousness. Your brain's capacity for high-quality, sustained attention is not infinite. It has a natural peak duration. For most people, between 90 minutes and 2 hours of genuinely demanding focus before quality begins to decline regardless of effort. Attempting to push through this wall with willpower doesn't maintain focus quality. It just disguises declining performance with increased effort at significant cost to recovery time. Work in focused cycles with genuine recovery between them. Not, I'll check social media for 10 minutes. The neurological profile of social media consumption is closer to stimulation than rest, and it does not provide the recovery your prefrontal cortex needs. True recovery means genuine cognitive detachment from work-related concerns. The most restorative recovery activities share a few key characteristics. They engage your attention gently, without intense cognitive demand. They often involve physical movement. They tend to involve natural environments or elements, and they provide psychological distance from the specific concerns and pressures of your work. A 15-minute walk outside, particularly in a natural setting, has been shown to significantly restore directed attention capacity. Physical exercise, even moderate movement, increases blood flow to the prefrontal cortex and releases neurochemicals that support focus. Brief meditation practices, even 5 to 10 minutes of simple breath awareness, activate the parasympathetic nervous system and provide genuine cognitive rest. Honor your recovery as seriously as you honor your work. The rhythm of exertion and rest is not a concession to weakness. It's the architecture of sustainable excellence. Chapter 6. The Focused Life. Beyond productivity, everything we've discussed so far has been largely framed in terms of productivity and performance. Doing more, accomplishing more, achieving more. And those outcomes are real and valuable. But there's a deeper reason to develop focus mastery that has nothing to do with productivity, and it may ultimately be more important than all of it. Deep attention is not just a work skill. It is the medium through which you experience your life. Presence as a practice. Think about the moments in your life that feel most meaningful, the conversations that changed you, the experiences that stayed with you, the relationships that sustain you. What do they have in common? They were moments of full presence, moments when you were actually there, not physically present while mentally elsewhere, but genuinely, completely, wholly present, when the person you were with had your full attention, when the experience you were having was allowed to fully reach you. Presence is not a passive state. It is a practiced skill, and it is trained by exactly the same mechanisms as work-focused attention. Every time you practice maintaining focus on a demanding cognitive task, you are building the same neural architecture that allows you to be fully present with another human being. Every time you practice noticing when your attention wanders and gently returning it to your chosen target, you are strengthening the same capacity that allows you to stay genuinely with a conversation instead of mentally composing your response while the other person is still talking. Focus mastery and presence mastery are not separate skills. They are the same skill expressed in different contexts. This means that when you commit to developing your focus, you're not just investing in your career or your productivity. You're investing in the quality of your relationships, the depth of your experience, the richness of your moment-to-moment life. The learning acceleration effect. There's a direct, measurable relationship between focus depth and learning speed. Deliberate practice, the kind of practice that produces genuine skill development rather than mere repetition of existing ability, requires sustained, attentive engagement with the specific aspects of performance you're trying to improve. When you can focus deeply during learning and practice, several things happen simultaneously. You encode new information more durably, forming stronger memories. You notice nuances and patterns you'd miss in a distracted state. You can work through complex conceptual difficulties that would defeat you if your attention were only partially engaged. You receive more meaningful feedback from your own performance, and you develop metacognitive awareness of your learning process itself, which allows you to identify and address your specific areas of weakness rather than just repeating your strengths. The result is that deep focus doesn't just make your learning sessions more productive in a linear sense. It changes the quality of what you learn, the depth of understanding, the durability of retention, and the flexibility of application. This compounds over time in ways that are difficult to overstate. The person who learns with full focus for 2 hours develops not twice the skill of the person who learns with fragmented attention for 4 hours. They may develop 10 times the skill, because depth of understanding enables the kind of transfer and integration that transforms isolated skills into genuine expertise. In a world where learning speed is increasingly decisive across every field, the ability to focus deeply during practice and study is not a nice-to-have. It is the skill that makes all other skill development possible at the highest level. Emotional regulation and focus. There's a profound connection between focus mastery and emotional well-being that rarely gets discussed in productivity conversations. An anxious mind is, almost by definition, a scattered mind. Anxiety is characterized by attention that's been captured by threat, real or imagined, and cannot be directed voluntarily. The anxious person doesn't choose to worry. Their attention is hijacked by worry, pulled toward it repeatedly, despite their best efforts to focus on something else. The metacognitive awareness you develop through focus training, the ability to notice where your attention is, to observe your own mental state without being overwhelmed by it, and to gently redirect your attention to a chosen target, is directly applicable to emotional regulation. When you can observe an anxious thought arising and recognize it as a mental event rather than a direct reflection of reality, you have a choice about how to respond to it. Not a perfect choice, not effortless, but a choice. The reactivity that characterizes unregulated emotional states, where the feeling immediately produces a behavioral response without any conscious intervening, is reduced by the same neural strengthening that improves your ability to sustain work-focused attention. Research on mindfulness-based interventions consistently shows significant reductions in anxiety, depression, and emotional reactivity, alongside improvements in attention and cognitive performance. These outcomes are not incidental. They are the result of the same underlying changes in neural architecture. You're not just building focus when you practice sustained attention. You're building the capacity to be less controlled by your own mental weather, to experience emotions, thoughts, and impulses without being fully at their mercy. The values alignment. Here's perhaps the deepest truth about focus mastery, the one that makes everything else make sense. The scattered life, the life lived in constant reaction to external demands, digital stimulation, and momentary impulses, is a life spent pursuing other people's priorities. The notifications you respond to were designed to serve someone else's agenda. The content you consume was optimized to capture your attention for someone else's benefit. The impulses you follow were often manufactured by systems designed to exploit your psychology. When you develop the ability to focus deliberately, when you can choose what to direct your attention toward and sustain that direction over time, you develop the ability to live according to your own values, not just the values that the attention economy has installed in your head through constant repetition and emotional triggering. This is what genuine autonomy looks like, not freedom from external demands. Those are unavoidable, but freedom to choose consciously and deliberately how you respond to them, what you give your time and attention to, what you build with your days, what kind of person you're becoming through the accumulation of your choices. The person who cannot focus is not free in any meaningful sense. They are constantly buffeted by external forces, internally reactive, living a life that looks busy, but is largely determined by forces outside their control. The person who has mastered focus has genuine agency. They can choose what matters to them and give it their full attention. They can ignore what doesn't align with their authentic values because they have the mental strength to resist the pull of distraction. They can build a life that reflects conscious choice rather than unconscious drift. This is the real promise of focus mastery. Not just a more productive workday, a more intentional, more authentic, more genuinely your own life. Chapter 7, The Long Game, Sustaining and Deepening Your Practice. Everything in this guide is designed to help you build a foundation. But the truth about focus mastery, like all genuine mastery, is that it is not a destination you arrive at. It is a practice that deepens indefinitely. The person who practices focused attention for 20 years doesn't just have 20 years of accumulated productive time. They have a qualitatively different relationship with their own mind, a depth of concentration, a stability of attention, and a capacity for presence that is genuinely remarkable. Here's how to structure a lifelong practice of focus development. The daily non-negotiables. There are 3 daily practices that, if maintained consistently, will ensure your focus continues to develop regardless of how busy, stressed, or distracted your life becomes. The morning intention. Before doing anything reactive, before checking your phone, before email, before news, take 5 minutes to sit with your own intentions for the day. What matters most today? What is the one thing, if you accomplish nothing else, that would make today genuinely worthwhile. Setting this intention before the external world gets its hooks into your attention ensures that your deepest priorities get addressed before the urgent and the trivial crowd them out. The deep work block. Every single day, without exception, protect at least one block of uninterrupted focused work on something that genuinely matters to you. The length of this block will evolve as your practice deepens, starting with 30 minutes, growing toward 2 hours or more, but the daily occurrence is what builds the neural architecture. Consistency is worth more than duration. The evening reflection. Take 5 minutes at the end of each day to briefly note how your focus went. What worked? What pulled you away? When were you most focused? And what conditions supported that? What would you do differently tomorrow? This brief reflective practice closes the learning loop that transforms daily experience into genuine skill development. Without it, you repeat the same patterns indefinitely. With it, you continuously refine and improve. Navigating the difficult patches, every serious practitioner of focus development will encounter periods where the practice feels impossible, where life circumstances are overwhelming, where old patterns reassert themselves with particular force, where progress seems to have reversed entirely. These periods are not failures. They are an inevitable part of the process, and how you respond to them largely determines the trajectory of your long-term development. The most important principle for navigating difficult patches is this: maintain the minimum viable practice rather than abandoning the practice entirely. When everything is overwhelming and your elaborate focus system has collapsed under the pressure of circumstances, don't conclude that focus development has failed or that you've lost all your progress. Simplify. Return to the minimum viable practice. 10 minutes of focused work, once a day, with the clear intention of maintaining the habit regardless of quality. 10 minutes of imperfect focus is infinitely more valuable than 0 minutes of perfect theorizing about what your practice should look like when conditions are better. Conditions will rarely be perfect. The practice happens in real life, not in ideal circumstances. The expanding horizon. As your practice deepens, you will begin to notice that what felt like heroic levels of sustained concentration one year become your comfortable baseline the next. The blocks that once required enormous effort become natural. The focus you had to fight for becomes something that arises readily when you create the conditions for it. This is how capacity expands, not through sudden leaps, but through a gradual, consistent deepening that becomes most evident when you look back over long time horizons. At the deeper levels of focus mastery, something qualitative begins to happen that's difficult to describe in purely technical terms. The boundary between you and your work begins to soften. The experience of focused engagement becomes intrinsically rewarding rather than just instrumentally useful. The state of deep absorption begins to feel like coming home rather than like an effortful achievement. This is what the contemplative traditions across human history have been pointing toward when they describe the fruits of sustained attention practice. Not just improved performance, but a qualitative transformation in the experience of being alive. Your work becomes more than work. Your relationships become more than relationships. Your presence in each moment becomes a fuller, richer, more complete experience of whatever you're engaged with. This is focus mastery at its deepest. Not a productivity tool, not a competitive advantage, a way of being alive, your invitation. You started this guide with a question. When was the last time you were truly focused, truly present, fully engaged with what you were doing and who you were with? You now have everything you need to make that experience the norm, rather than the rare exception. You understand why focus has become so difficult. The attention economy, the dopamine exploitation, the manufactured craving that keeps you reactive and scattered. You understand the neuroscience, how your brain works, how it changes through practice, and how you can deliberately reshape it through consistent training. You have the environmental design principles to create conditions that support rather than undermine your concentration. You have the system architecture, the daily structures, the deep work blocks, the rituals and routines that transform focused work from an effortful exception to a natural habit. You have the advanced techniques, flow cultivation, metacognitive monitoring, internal enemy management, cognitive load reduction, that take your focus from good to exceptional. And you have the deeper vision of focus not just as a productivity skill, but as a way of living more intentionally, more presently, more fully in alignment with what actually matters to you. The only question remaining is the one it always comes down to. In the end, are you going to begin? Not someday, not when conditions are perfect, not when you feel ready. Now, close this guide, take a breath, and make one decision about how you will protect your focus today. One block of uninterrupted work, one notification turned off, one phone placed in a different room, one morning intention set before the world gets to you, one choice, then another, then another. That's how a focused life is built, not in grand gestures, but in the steady accumulation of small, deliberate choices made consistently over time by someone who has decided that their attention is worth protecting. Your attention is worth protecting. Your focus is worth developing. Your life is worth living with your full presence. Begin.